Zoom recording now.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just wait for your signal and we can begin.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we're ready. I can move on to the slide.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, everyone. Steering Committee, thank you again for your time this evening. Welcome to the second Steering Committee meeting of the Park Hill Golf Course visioning process. Tonight's agenda is filled with very foundational things. When we look out at the year, we had a couple of meetings right up front where it was a lot of foundational information, and then I think you get into the real work of this committee. We wanted to make sure that you had all of the foundational information and opportunities to ask any questions that you had early in the process so that we might have what we needed to get some of the work done. So tonight is an example of that. You will have tonight visioning process overview that Courtney will be doing for us. It really is to give us some of the parameters of this visioning process. I do think there are some people that are still waiting to truly understand what the role and agenda and opportunity is of this committee. And so some of that will come out of that overview. There also is a little bit of a data presentation. It's the Park Hill Golf Course area demographics and what we know about the area so far presentation that Courtney also will help to lead for us. Again, it gives us an opportunity to fill in any blanks that we might have about some of the factual scenarios in the community. And then James Roy tonight will do a history of the Park Hill area, and will also give us an opportunity to learn even more about the community and ask some questions where appropriate as well. And then we'll do the wrap up. I'll tee us up for the next meeting. A couple of things I just want to be really frank with you about. Originally, the steering committee charter conversation was going to happen tonight. But when I started looking at what else was in the agenda, I felt like we weren't going to have the time that I think that particular body of work requires. I think we don't need to rush it. I think we need to spend enough time on it so that everybody's voice is heard in it. Thank you to each of you on the steering committee that have already sent some of your thoughts forward to us so that we know things that you really want to talk about. And this gives you another meeting to be able to look at that document and weigh in as well. And we'll spend all of the time that we need to in the April meeting to get through the document, hear all of the voices, and hopefully come out with a charter that we can all operate from. So I wanted you to know the rationale for me moving it. I emailed you about that, but I wanted to say that on the record. The other thing that I want to say, and then we'll get going because I think we're going to need all the time that we have. The other thing that I want to say is I want to acknowledge something that's just obvious, but I don't want to tap dance around it. This is a complicated, complex, and volatile scenario. This steering committee has been convened to work through the process of creating a recommendation. We're not the decision makers, but we're going to create a recommendation. And there are all kinds of voices that are involved here with all kinds of positions about what we should do, what we shouldn't do, what this is all about, whether this is real, whether this is a farce. There are all kinds of opinions about that. I don't discount any of them. But what I will say to you is, if you're really committed to doing this, we're going to have to get to the point where we can believe that we have an opportunity to make a difference here. If we already don't believe we have an opportunity to make a difference, then it's pointless for any of us to be here, me included. But if we believe that we can make a difference here, and we can trust as best we can that we're trying to create a process here in this meeting anyway, for all of the voices to resonate and be heard in this process, then I think we can do great work. I want to acknowledge, though, that that isn't easy. It isn't easy for our communities either. So I do want you to know that there's an extra layer of complexity in this work that involves a community bigger than just the steering committee. I wanted to publicly acknowledge that. I acknowledge that on behalf of your facilitator, but I also want to acknowledge it because you serving as steering committee members also represent some of those complexities too. We'll work through that together. So I want to get started, and Courtney, I think we launched this with you, just doing the process overview with us. And then of course, if there are any questions that you have of Courtney, we'll be happy to entertain those. Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks. Oh, see here. All right. So thank you so much, Dr. Tyler. That was a great intro. And I think tonight we wanted to briefly go over just kind of the visioning process from a macro perspective, so we're all kind of on the same page. So like Dr. Tyler said, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, or if you prefer, you can always follow up later via email or phone, always keeping Dr. Tyler in the loop, of course, but we want to provide a variety of avenues for you to get your questions answered in whatever way you feel most comfortable. But please feel free to ask questions while I'm talking. So we'll start with a bit of background, and I'll just kind of start out by acknowledging, I know that there are more details than this, and there's a lot of folks that are really knowledgeable about the subject, but really this is just a summary. So just to start, the Park Hill Golf Course is a privately owned 155-acre parcel in Northeast Denver. Initially, the golf course use was established back in the 1930s as a way for Clayton Early Learning to fund their charitable endeavors. In 1997, the city paid Clayton Trust about $2 million to put the property into a conservation easement. The easement agreement, and that's available on the process website, you'll see that website at the bottom of the screen there, requires the property to be used for an 18-hole golf course. In 2018, the golf course that closed. Next, as part of the Platte to Park Hill Stormwater Project, construction started on the stormwater detention pond in the northern portion of the property. In 2019, Westside Investment Partners purchased the property from Clayton Trust for $24 million. So now that the property ownership has changed, we want to have a conversation with the community about the future vision for the property. As you all know, we're early in the conversation and we need to get direction on the big picture version of what should happen here. All options are on the table. Should the property revert back to an 18-hole golf course? Should it be all park and open space? Should there be a large public park and open spaces and some level of development on the site? What we want to say too is what's not possible, and that's development on the property without any large public park and open spaces. I know folks are really eager to, dig into the details, but really we just want to talk about, large public park and open spaces, and development on the property is not possible without that, that component. So really we're here to have a candid conversation with the community about what should happen. The steering committee roles and responsibilities, kind of digging a little bit more of, what the charge is of the steering committee and what you're here to do, your role and responsibility. As you know, the steering committee is a cross-section of the community formed in an advisory capacity to have more frequent and detailed conversations about the process, helping us synthesize and understand what we're hearing from the larger community through, those R&O meetings, those large public open houses, what we're hearing from the community navigators, and the statistically valid surveys, the open link online surveys, those different inputs. The steering committee also, you'll help get the word out about what's going on and get that to your networks. And you also gather input, so bringing those viewpoints to this discussion table. We should note that this is an advisory group that is not the final decision maker on the outcome of the visioning process, but it essentially makes a recommendation to the city on the vision direction. So there'll be a lot of different ways we'll be learning from the community to understand the direction of the community's vision. The steering committee dialogue and engagement efforts are one of those avenues for listening to the community, as well as the community navigator conversations culminating into that summary report. Other factors are the community surveys, which will both be mailed and available online, as well as feedback we hear and collect from groups and events. So you see, those inputs here on the left side of the screen, groups and events, surveys, steering committees, all different inputs there, and those things inform the city on the decision to what to do next. So hopefully that can be kind of clear on what we're doing in the next 6 months. So that, that wraps up the high level visioning process overview. And Dr. Tyler, I don't know if you would like to pause here and kind of talk a little bit about this section before we move on.
Yeah, let's pause. I want to make sure the steering committee has an opportunity to ask any questions that they might have about just our charge on the visioning side here. Any thoughts or questions or comments from the steering committee?
Yes, Courtney said some development. Shouldn't be some development. It should be more than just some development. So I just want to point that out.
Okay, Courtney, did you get that?
We can't hear Courtney.
Thank you. You'd think after a year in the pandemic, I'd learn how to use Zoom better than I do. But yes, I did get that Imam's comment. We also have David Gaspers here, the principal in charge, and Sung from our project team, all helping to take notes and capture what we're hearing here today.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Imam. Evelyn, go right ahead. Evelyn, yeah. Thank you.
My question has to do with a couple of slides back. On the left margin of that particular PowerPoint slide, you had listed the inputs, the different inputs. And so I'm curious to know, are the different inputs weighted in any capacity, or are they all going to be considered equally?
Right. They're all really important parts to the community engagement process. And the steering committee, your recommendation is very important to us. But also what the feedback we hear from the community navigators and different groups and events, these are all really important avenues that we're hearing the community voice that will be equally considered by the decision makers.
Okay, so just for clarity, before you move on, Courtney, what I heard you say just now is confirming that there will be equal weight distributed amongst the different inputs. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. Shanta Harrison, go right ahead.
Hi, I'm not sure I understood Ali's question regarding the development. I don't understand what he was saying there. Can somebody explain that to me a little bit more? Or Ali, can you expound upon your comment?
Well, yeah, during her opening, Courtney said that there would be some development, which begs the question, there has to be some, in terms of park space, yes, some park space, but certainly some development. And not just parks,
Well, I think that there are people on this panel that are of differing opinions, and I think that's what Dr. Tyler was alluding to, and as well as Courtney. So I think that they're considering all possibilities, not just all development.
Of course.
So I think that's why Dr. Tyler was saying what she said in the very beginning. So I just wanted to know exactly where you were coming from with that.
Thank you.
I was just mentioning that there seemed to be a tilt toward more park space than development in what Courtney said, and I just wanted to comment on that.
And some of us feel that it's just the opposite. So I'm glad that Dr. Tyler is open to hearing all viewpoints.
Yes.
Well, absolutely. That's why we're here.
That's right. Let me go to Sandria Robnett, and then I think Rachel Coates.
Hi, thank you. So I have a question, and I know that I saw this question come up in the next door conversations and so on and so forth. And Courtney just kind of touched on this a little bit. Later in the process, I think, and I know it was like March 24th, there's going to be a public comment kind of section for people to come in and express their opinions. But we're just curious. I represent SOS, and just out of curiosity, why are panelists or people, attendees, not able to ask questions or make comments during this time and during these meetings?
I think it's a great question. I can answer a part of it just because I know a part of the answer. I think we have to build this meeting to do that. One of the things that Courtney and I just had a conversation about a little bit today is all of the future meetings need to have a component in the meeting for the public to have an opportunity to ask questions or be a part of the dialogue too. So I think building it out in the way that you're describing it is right. I think that's exactly what we'll do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking the question. Rachel, is it Rachel or Rochelle?
It's Rachel.
Rachel, thank you for
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I'm a little confused when the language includes that every option is on the table, because from my understanding, there's really two options: to either honor the easement or to have it lifted legally before we have a visioning process. So I'm wondering if we can get some clarity on that tonight.
Yeah, great question, Rachel. Courtney, do you or David want to weigh in there?
Well, sure. I'll take a stab at it, and David, as my trusty colleague, can always jump in if I fail to mention something important detail. But really, it's kind of a chicken and egg too with the conservation easement, with all options on the table. Like, yes, either the easement remains and there's a 18-hole golf course, or it's amended, right? We want to talk about the amending of the easement to allow uses other than an 18-hole golf course. I think I'm like,
Am I misunderstanding though that the language of the easement is open to interpretation on that point, like in regards to the 18-hole golf course? Because I guess I'm reading it differently than you must be.
Right. So this is what has been provided to us by the city attorney's office, because I am not a lawyer. I don't even play one on TV very well. So when I read the conservation easement, I rely on our legal experts to help with the understanding of that. And we see the word open, when you recitals in the beginning of that, that's, kind of setting the stage, right? And then you go into the actual agreement language, and it says, open space and 18-hole golf course, right? It doesn't say an or, it says an and. But really, that's our understanding, that it needs to be used as a golf course. And I'll allow David to, step in if there's anything I may have misstated there.
No, that's correct, Courtney. And you're right. The city attorney's office has advised that this process is completely separate from the conversation about the easement itself. And so we really separated the two discussions.
Thank you for that. Jerry Grimes, you're next if you'd like to go ahead.
No, my question was answered, but do have a question back on the one chart that showed that the surveys going out in March. Now, how was that survey developed? Are they already being mailed?
The survey. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yes, the survey.
You just want to know a little bit more about the surveys?
Yes, how were they developed? Are they already starting to go out? I'm just looking at the time frame, and it has March in there.
Yeah, so we're working with a company to administer a statistically valid survey to residential properties within a mile of the Park Hill Golf Course property, that radius. And it was developed in conjunction with those experts. And so those will be mailed to those properties. And so those receiving the statistically valid survey, they should be hitting mailboxes, later this week, is my understanding, and that they have the opportunity to take the survey and fill it out and send it back in a self-addressed stamped envelope, or they have a code and they can fill it out online. The survey is available in both English and Spanish. And so that's the statistically valid survey. Then the same survey will be available as an open link for anyone in the city to take and to weigh in. So there's, the same survey. It's just, we're using the statistically valid company to help us administer that, so we can get a sample population. Does that make sense? I hope I didn't provide, too much detail, or it was confusing.
Jerry, does that help?
Well, my only concern, when we all know when we send out surveys, especially for individuals that might have difficulty filling them out and their voice then doesn't get heard, is there any backup to that or follow-up that will be done if people do not respond to the survey?
Yeah. So that basically we have to get enough responses to make it statistically valid.
No,
So
I'm saying if you don't get responses to the individuals that you send it out to, is there any follow-up from there?
Yes.
What would that look like?
I think that there's things like they have door hangers, and we're working actively to get those responses from those community members.
Thank you, Courtney.
Mm-hmm.
Patty, you're up next.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, in regards to the community-wide open house and the surveys, is there a way that maybe us who are in the community that live here can help facilitate that and make sure that people, like I can, my child goes to Stedman Elementary. I'm here. I talk to my neighbors all the time. Is there a way that I can help in a way so that my community knows what's going on? And because I feel like we all throw away paper all the time. I mean, I don't ever keep anything. I just recycle it. So is there any way that we can help in that aspect?
Yeah, in terms of the upcoming community-wide open house, please, yes, that's exactly what we would love for the steering committee to help us with, is go back to your networks, those, and encourage them to register for the open house, get them involved, answer questions, be a conduit, and help us, gather input.
Is that survey, oh, sorry to interrupt. Is that survey facilitated via email, or is it just paper? Because it's easier for me to reach out to my Stedman community or my neighbors via email, and then they can, it's just easier than paper, to be honest.
Right, so there will be an open link to those that do not live within the mile of the Park Hill Golf Course. There'll be an open link available, so then I'll be able to give you that open link to an online survey, and then you'll be able to push that out.
Is that good, Patty?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. Shandi, go right ahead.
Hi, I just had a follow-up question to one that somebody mentioned earlier around the conservation easement. And I was wondering if there was going to be an opportunity to provide more information, kind of layman terms, about the details of the existing easement, and then if there are precedent that the city has looked into on the ramifications of changing a conservation easement, and how that may impact easements for this property, and then how the city sees that as future precedent for other opportunities that may come up.
Unmute. Those are great questions. With the open house on March 25th, we're planning to have John McGrath from the City Attorney's Office be a panelist and attend to be able to answer those more detailed questions, like your second one about the precedent setting of a conservation easement for the community, because like I said, I'm not a legal expert when it comes to conservation easement law. In terms of providing, information about the conservation easement in layman's terms. On the city's website, we do have an FAQ document that kind of goes through frequently asked questions about the conservation easement that can help folks understand a little bit more about those.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel, go right ahead.
Yeah, along those regards, are there any opportunities for folks who aren't associated with the city to be able to give their input to how the easement can be interpreted? I guess from where I'm sitting, it really seems one-sided. And as we're discussing here, there is different interpretations of the easement language. And so I think it would be helpful in the interest of transparency to maybe provide some alternative views on what that easement really indicates.
Okay.
Got it, Courtney and David?
Yep.
Great suggestion, thank you. Are there any other questions about this briefing of the visioning process? These are great questions and comments. David, I see your hand, and then Danette, I'll come to you, okay? Okay, David Martin, go right ahead.
Thanks. We've kind of hammered it quite a bit, and I'm just going to chime in my opinion as well related to the use of the suggestion that the conservation easement requires the land to be a golf course. And I just want to chime in myself that I think the planning department should walk a finer line when they say stuff like that, because the city has only issued an opinion. It's not been a legal ruling. And there are multiple legal opinions that can surround the interpretation of that conservation easement purposes versus its uses. And if you're going to say that it has to be an 18-hole golf course, I think you should consistently and always preface it with that it is the city's legal opinion that it must be this. And we recognize that there be other opinions related to this. Until it's settled as a matter of law, I don't think you should be speaking to it as law. I think it's disingenuous, and I think it's doing a disservice to the community overall. That's just my opinion on it. So I'm done.
Thank you, David. Then we'll capture it. I appreciate that. Danette, you go right ahead.
So, hi, I live across the street from the golf course. So I am interested in the inclusion piece. I know we're doing surveys, and maybe I'm asking this question too early, but how much of inclusion, how much of a role is inclusion going to be playing in the process? You know, the visioning thing I just saw was pretty sort of generic in that, but are we going to be able to be specific about the community members who live here and including them, and particularly people who need affordable housing? But I might be jumping ahead. I'm not sure.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what what you're thinking of and what suggestions, like,
Well,
can you tell me more?
So if you're going around, you're asking surveys of what people want, right? Is that, and forgive me for my ignorance. Right. I've not really been a part of a program such as this one, so I'm learning as I go. Mm-hmm. But you're going around and you're doing surveys of people in this community, asking them what they would want to happen to the land. And it would, so far, we're only to the steps of leave it a golf course, develop the whole thing, or half and half, don't develop. Is that sort of the only question that we're asking, or?
No, so the statistically valid survey and that open link survey is talking about not only that, but talking about needs in the community, desires, things of that nature. So it's not just 3 questions. It's more going into detail of what the community vision is for the future and what the needs are.
So is there a way to share that, or has it already been shared, the actual questions that you're asking community members?
Yeah, we can share that.
If you don't mind, I'd like to see.
Great. Thank you, Danette. Another important question. I'm going to go to Sean next. Go right ahead, Sean. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I had to jump off and back on because I realized I wasn't on the webinar side, but was listening in. For the survey, and Danette maybe was touching on this while I was off, is the city tracking those people that are within 1 mile separately from the open link? Is there going to be any weight given to the neighborhood versus the greater city?
Yes, the statistically valid survey is the one that is administered by ETC, the consultant, and that is going to be sent out to properties within
Right.
a mile of the, so that will be kept separate, right? Those responses are kept separate, yeah.
Okay, that answers. And then it's clear that the easement is going to be an issue and a topic of discussion. And I think Courtney, your colleague, and maybe that was David, I can't remember exactly, but had talked about that we're going to keep that issue separate from this committee. But I think we could spend the whole night trying to figure out what are we going to do with the easement. So it would be good to maybe hear from Dr. Tyler, like, are we going to have just a basis of assumptions to engage the conversation? Because I'm afraid if we don't, we're going to keep talking about the easement.
Yeah, I have an opinion. Let me just say that my opinion is it's an omission if we don't have a conversation about it. I think it's the elephant in the room. And so I think we have to be really honest about that. At some point, there is a conversation to be had about it. I think that I will lean on each of you very heavily about how to prioritize that conversation so it doesn't stop us in the process. But I don't think it's a smart move to ignore it as something that's very important to the people that are involved in this process. It's just one of those components that I think you don't ignore. We need voice to that too. That's the world according to Nita.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sandria, you go ahead. And Patty, let me ask you, your hand is still up. Did you? Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't ignoring you.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So here, as we look at the panelists, are there other people identified as a panelist in this role that aren't necessarily panelists? So like I'm seeing a name on here, one name in particular, that's not like a panelist identified on the website. So, but I also see James Roy, who I know is not a panelist. So I just want to make sure that this panelist section is a group of people that aren't specifically steering committee members. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, James Roy is one of the presenters that's coming up next. So that's the reason you see his face.
Understood, but in particular, who is Sung Won Han? That name is not identified on our panelist list. So I'm just curious who that person is.
I'm an associate city planner, just taking notes and attendance for the meeting.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, I had to promote him to a panelist so he could see the panelist list on Zoom and be able to take attendance and help me with the the logistics. So yeah,
that's what I wanted to confirm. I thought that was probably the case, but I wanted to confirm that was. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for doing that. Pastor Dell, you go right ahead. I see your hand. Pastor Dell, unmute yourself. Go right ahead.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I just wanted to offer. I just wanted to weigh in on the conversation concerning the conservation easement. I do understand that it can be seen as the elephant in the room, but I think it also can become the elephant that prevents the room from moving forward. And and my comment that I made in the chat was simply referring to what has been defined as the responsibility of the steering committee, because some are already assuming that it cannot be modified, and that's part of the whole challenge here. There are differing opinions about how that can be handled legally. And I don't think that's our responsibility to try to settle that in the steering committee if we are going to be true to the to what the definition what has been defined in our responsibility. So, you know, if there is going to be a session to simply allow everyone to weigh in on the conservation easement, et cetera, I don't see a problem with that, but to allow it to just sneak in, you know, randomly and kind of take away the focus from what our core responsibility is supposed to do, I would have concerns about that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Pastor Phillips. We appreciate that. Any other questions? These are all great questions. I know Courtney and David are capturing many of the comments that you've been making that are really important to this. And anything else before we keep going? Okay, Courtney, you want to progress?
Courtney, you're muted.
Thank you. I was just asking, or I can ask you, David, Dr. Tyler, just confirming you can see the slide, right?
Yes.
We can see
Okay,
the slide.
good.
Thank you.
Okay, just making sure, just checking in on. So next we'll move into learning about the area from a demographics perspective with some supporting data from our equity measure framework. So again, the Park Hill Golf Course property is on the western edge of the Northeast Park Hill statistical neighborhood right there. You can see it in green. You know, understanding that those who live and work in an area experience their communities without neighborhood, you know, geographical boundaries. You know, we've pulled the demographic data for not only the Northeast Park Hill statistical neighborhood, but also, you know, the half-mile and 1 mile radius that's taken from the property line around the Park Hill Golf Course. You know, these radii include the Northeast Park Hill neighborhood, as well as portions of the Elaria Swansea neighborhood. You can see, you know, to the northwest, portions of Clayton and a bit of Skyland to the south, as well as the northern portion of North Park Hill neighborhood. You know, that starts around south of MLK Jr. Boulevard. So over the past decade, Denver has grown in population about 2% annually, where the populations of households within the 1 mile radius of the Park Hill Golf Course property, you know, that has grown a little bit slower at a rate about 1.7% over the last 10 years. So there has been growth, just at a bit slower of a rate than we're seeing citywide. You know, the communities near the Park Hill Golf Course are home to young families. So here on this slide, you want to look at the beige line, which is Denver as a whole. It's below the other lines here, which are show the different geographies of the Park Hill Golf Course area. You know, the takeaway here from the recent census data is that the percentage of the population under the age of 17 is about 5% greater than the city as a whole. You know, this slide shows ethnic and racial makeup of the city as compared, or of the communities and the Northeast Park Hill neighborhood, the 1 mile and half-mile radiuses, you know, those geographies as compared to the city as a whole. So, you know, you'll see the top bar here is Denver, and the city at large, sorry. So, you know, next we'll move on to socioeconomic data. You know, the communities near the Park Hill Golf Course property have a little bit less educational attainment and a higher percentage of households living under the poverty line than Denver as a whole. We know that, you know, increasing educational attainment and lifting households out of poverty are linked to better community health outcomes. So really, we wanted to just kind of understand and highlight this data. And then we can move on to our, you know, the background information, those studies that are underway. We're working, as I said, with independent professional consultants to provide us with data and high-level analysis about the area in 3 key areas: environmental, parks and recreation, the economic landscape or the market study, and mobility study. So currently they're finalizing these studies, and we will make them publicly available on the website once they're completed, hopefully around early April. So we wanted to give the steering committee a preview of the initial findings from the studies to help ground future conversations and provide some context. So about the studies, DIG consultants, they are doing the environmental parks and recreation study. That's focusing on mapping and quantifying our natural assets and parks, and we have in the city. The market study is done by Arlen Land Use Economic Firm, which provides data around needs and market demands in the area for housing, the commercial market demand, and feasibility of an 18-hole golf course from a business perspective. And finally, the mobility study that's been done by David Evans and Associates, which is kind of a high-level assessment of the multimodal network, so helping us understand gaps in the sidewalk, bike lane system, transit ridership in the area, safety like crash data. So really, these studies are helping put some data behind some things we might think we already know, or things that we may not know. So we'll start with area parks and open spaces. There are several existing city parks within 1 mile of the Park Hill Golf Course property, the closest being the city of Axon Park to the south, city of Nairobi Park to the west, and Boyd Park to the southwest. These existing parks are smaller, neighborhood kind of level parks ranging in size from about 2 to 8 acres, while City Park, that's a regional scale park, is about 330 acres. And that's, just to the south, over a mile away. So part of the parks recreation and environmental study, is an analysis of existing city park acreage, showing that, Northeast Park Hill neighborhood, Clayton and Elaria Swansea, those are all below the national and city averages for park acres per 1,000 residents. Also, an interesting kind of initial finding from the study is also looking at the impacts of tree canopy in the urban environment, specifically the urban heat island effect in the neighborhoods surrounding the Park Hill Golf Course. So you'll see the map here. I know it's kind of hard to read at the bottom, but basically it's an urban heat island map. The red areas here have hotter temperatures, and the yellow-green areas have cooler temperatures. So, taking a step back for a second, maybe not everyone is familiar with the urban heat island effect. So, basically it's when you see temperature differences in the environment based on, the surrounding unshaded buildings and dark colored roads absorbing and radiating heat into the surrounding air. That's the most distinct way to kind of describe it. So looking at the map again, the industrial areas to the north and maybe, northeast, maybe a little northwest of the Park Hill Golf Course have a higher heat island index, but the Park Hill Golf Course itself clearly has a lower urban heat island index, and as do the more developed neighborhoods to the south, those are green, to the south and west. So we also know that tree canopy coverage can help mitigate the urban heat island effect. So North Park Hill neighborhood shows a lower heat island impact with about 35% tree canopy coverage. And the source of this is the DPR's tree report card, and you can see the little link down there. If you'd like to check this out, it's actually a really fun tool to play around with if you're a tree nerd like myself. But going back to the table, the Northeast Park Hill neighborhood meets the city's tree canopy goal at around 18%. So you can kind of see here what the tree canopy coverage is, related to, and kind of juxtaposing that with the urban heat island effect. Interesting stuff here. So moving on to golf as part of the market study. we're looking at golf from a demand perspective. Market demand from golf courses are typically calculated by looking at the 10-mile radius around the golf course location, as shown on the map here. Most golf courses are concentrated to the south between the 5-mile radius from Park Hill Golf Course and the 10-mile radius. What the initial market study findings are telling us is that based on the existing supply of 18-hole golf courses, there's not really a clear demand for an 18-hole golf course in this location. From a recreation perspective, there's been a decreased participation in the sport kind of overall nationwide since 2006. However, we do know that in Colorado, a lot more people last year were golfing in 2020. The study findings kind of extrapolate that could be attributed to the pandemic, that spike in players, recreational participants of golf. More information will be provided in the market study and available for review to help inform your opinions and your thoughts around golf feasibility in this location. Again, we just wanted to tee up what you'll be seeing later in those studies.
Courtney, before you go on, can you go back to that slide that you just were on? We have a couple of questions, I think, that's specific to that one. Fred Glick's question is, what do the numbers mean? And then Rachel wants to know, where's the data to support these statistics on golf participation? These are both questions in the chat.
So the numbers, those are just, and this is cut from the draft study. Like I said, it's not finalized. Those, like you'll see in the key that it's basically like number 4, that's this golf course, or number 11, that's country or City Park golf course, right? So it's identifying, it's like a key essentially. I didn't, apologies for not cutting out the key with like number 7, so you know the name of each of those golf courses. So really they're just identifying them. And then what was the other question? I'm sorry, Anita.
So the other question is, where's the data to support these statistics on golf participation?
Right. So the data is in the study, the market study, and then they're getting that data from the National Golf Association, I believe. That's one of the sources. We do have Will Wagenlander, which is with David Evans and Associates here tonight, that he might be able to answer a few more questions. If David can't answer those too, I just want to make you aware that we do have the consultant that's helping with the studies be able to speak if the steering committee so chooses.
I guess there's a contrasting question, and that is, this is from David Martin. What purpose does providing the golf study do for our committee and our task ahead?
Yeah, I think it provides a little bit more information. I personally, like, there may be some people in the community that they don't understand, like, they might think golf is a booming business. Why wouldn't we want a golf course here? So we want to look at, or the alternate perspective may be true. So we just want to have a little bit more data and information around trends in golf, the feasibility of golf, just to help folks, form their opinions.
Thank you, Courtney.
Okay. Am I okay to move on here?
Absolutely.
Okay. So next we'll talk about fresh food access. So we know from Denver's Food Vision Plan that many neighborhoods in Denver have limited access to grocery stores where they can get affordable and healthy fresh foods. Limited access to healthy foods can result in health impacts. So the map here shows the location in national grocery stores with the green squares. Those are the national chains, and then the smaller specialty markets with those yellow dots there. So preliminary data from the market study shows that there is a gap in full service grocery store supply in this area. Again, a gap in the green squares, think that here. With an estimated demand for additional full service fresh food grocery store. But that's always caveated with that each grocer has their own parameters of how they select locations based on their own business model, and where there might be a gap or a demand. It's still there's two sides to an equation when it comes to grocery store access or grocery store location. So we'll move on.
Courtney, I'm sorry to stop you in mid-sentence. If you go back to the previous slide, we have a question. And the question is from David Martin. Are you investigating difference between food desert and food insecurity in the context of the slide that you've got in front of us?
So those who are insecure versus if it's considered a food desert. I think I would lean on David Gasper's. I think we're looking at, this is clearly a food, there's a food desert from a full service grocery store perspective, but I'm not really sure, about that aspect. David, could you weigh in?
That's a really good question and distinction that we can take a deeper dive. I'm sure the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment might have some ways that they can help assist us in taking a deeper look into the difference between those two, and we can get back to you.
Thank you, David. And Patty in the chat shares information with us that the Dahlia Health Center isn't reflected on this map, but they do provide affordable fresh produce. May not be in that standard sort of way that we see a lot of supermarkets, but it does serve that need. Thank you for that, Patty.
Great.
Thank
you. Yeah, great. So talking about moving on to housing. So once again, preliminary data from the market study shows that rents between 2010 and 2018 have increased between 30 and 60% in Northeast Park Hill, and that 64% of renter households in Northeast Park Hill, that's about 1,230 are cost burdened. So a household is considered cost burdened when more than 30% of their monthly income is dedicated to housing costs. That's inclusive of utilities. They're considered severely cost burdened when they spend more than half of their income with utilities on housing. This is also talking about home sale prices, 2014 and 15 versus 2019 and 2020. So we have some data on the change in home sale prices, comparing those two, 2014, that year, and 2019. The big takeaway here is that the 1 mile radius surrounding the Park Hill Golf Course property, 5-6 years ago, we saw more blues and greens, right? Looking at that map, more blues and greens, you can see those average sale prices. And then in 2019 and 2020, in that same area, we see, there's no more blue, right? And mostly yellows and greens, indicating with the yellow sale prices up to $550,000. So quite the increase in average sales prices. This data is from the assessor's office, just FYI. So even with COVID, there's still residential demand in Denver, that the data is preliminarily, our preliminary findings. So, over the next 10 years, Denver Regional Council of Governments predicting that additional 7,800 households will be in the area. So that's growth there. And it's also showing that there will be a gap or a need of about 4,500 units in that larger 10 neighborhood area. So we're not just talking about the Northeast Park Hill Golf Course neighborhood, but kind of the 10 neighborhood areas surrounding that, with the biggest need for housing units for those making less than $20,000 a year. And moving on, we're also looking at mobility study and how people move through and around the area at a high level. you know, with the map here, kind of the dashed lines are the missing sidewalk connections. The red indicates that the sidewalk exists, but they may be smaller than the 5-foot width standard. As part of Denver Moves, painted street bike lanes are in the works as well on Dahlia. In terms of transit, RTD data shows that citywide bus ridership decrease of about 70% this past year, you know, attributed to the pandemic. And while bus ridership did decline in the area, or it did decrease, it didn't decrease as much as we see that citywide level. And then, so, you know, based on crash data collected, we know that Colorado Boulevard is a safety concern for all modes, clearly. You know, with the map here, the larger the dot, the more crashes at the intersections. You know, specifically, the most crashes at Colorado and 40th, next Colorado and 35th, and then Colorado and Bruce Randolph, you know, between 2016 and 2019. That's the crash data. So, you know, just kind of wrapping that up, you know, like we said, we'll make these publicly available in April, those 3 studies, but those are just kind of the, you know, the high level kind of takeaway findings from those 3 studies, as well as demographic data.
Courtney, there are a couple of questions that I hope this is the time to ask them.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is from Jeff Martinez. Jeff wants to know if we know how much affordable housing, particularly for senior or disabled residents, is available within 1 to 3 miles of the golf course.
I don't know that information off the top of my head, and I'm not sure that the market study looks at that. I can double check. We'll make a note of it.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then Sandria wants to know what is meant by units. Do units include houses?
Yeah. Units are like single unit, 2 unit, multi-unit, the housing unit.
Okay. Thank you. Is that the end of your?
Yep, I'm gonna stop sharing. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Courtney.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have some questions from you, if you have some. I see David Martin. Go right ahead, David.
I was just circling back to my question that I put into the chat while Courtney was going through her list, and I'll go ahead and frame it a little bit. She was on the slide where it was talking about the increase in housing costs and basically the increase in housing in general, regardless of the reason for the cost, like electricity, utilities, all that kind of stuff. But has it also been studied why those costs are rising? It's great to throw out numbers at us and say, okay, well, it increased 30%, but was it ever studied why it increased 30%? What factors went into that increase? And I'm not for sure where you're pulling the data from, if that's all going to be made publicly available, but that's just as important as stating that it did increase 30%.
I have a question.
Jeanette, hang on 1 second. Courtney, I just want to make sure you've captured David's question. Okay, you've captured it. Okay, great. Thank you. The next person in line was Patty.
Yes, hi. So I have a few questions with the presentation that I really enjoyed. So I do know on the affordable housing side of it, I do know that the recently, maybe in the past within 3 years, there was some affordable housing built on 40th and Colorado. And my question is, how, like, is there, even with after building that, is there still more of a need within the neighborhood, first? And second, like, how's that going? And then I really appreciate the fact that you point out the environmental aspect of it, because, you know, living in the neighborhood, there's definitely a lot of industrial areas here. There's not a lot of open spaces. And even now with the golf course, and I run there almost every other day, I don't think people feel welcome there in my community. And some of us have to even go to like Central Park or Stapleton to even like there's not a pool area around us for our community, for our kids. I mean, there's so many kids in this community and they don't feel welcome in neighborhoods other than here. And there's not an area for us to unite and community, you know, to like get to know each other. I'm just wondering, like, I just wanted you guys to know, if you guys, for those that don't live here, like how it is, you know, it's not easy for, you know, a person of color to just be running on the Park Hill golf course. I mean, I even asked my neighbors, come run with me. And they're like, oh, I don't know, I don't feel welcome. So I'm just, there is a need for open space. There's a need for people to walk. There's a senior living center here and I see older people walking there. And there's just, and like you say, there's so much traffic, Colorado Boulevard and all that. I mean, there's definitely a need for trails and all of that for a community to be able to feel free to do all that without being looked at differently. So I just want to make sure that people understand like the needs of the community and the importance of those open spaces, even though I know that a lot of you guys want developments and all of that. I just think that it's important for our kids to also have that and be and feel free to enjoy it in some aspects. So anyways.
Thank you for that, Patty. Evelyn, go right ahead.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Courtney. I have a question related to one of your slides regarding affordable housing prices. You did that comparison over, I believe, a 4 to 5 year period. So my specific question is, what impact does the development or the non-development of green spaces have on home prices in terms of increase or decrease? And then while you're queuing up the response to that, I think it's important for this steering committee in terms of transparency to have definitions whenever possible. What I found in talking with community members is we clump different levels of pricing of homes into that affordable housing category, and it's not all the same. So AMI is not the same as low income, for example. And so, and that was on one of your slides, Courtney, you pointed out that that is going to be the higher need in the future, which is that essential worker class. And so I think it'll be important to unpack some of the terms that some of us may be familiar with, but others who view this later or see the write-up may not be as well acquainted with.
Thank you for that, Evelyn. Next is Danette, and Danette, after you is Drew.
Yeah, I had a language comment as well. The sort of blanket term unit gives me pause because moving forward again, and I might be getting ahead of myself, to say we're building 20,000 units for people because there's a need for housing right now. It would be nice to be very specific. Is it going to be, you know, units, or is it going to be homes, or, you know, it would be nice to be able to differentiate, because building homes versus building 500 square foot apartments for whole families to squeeze into is there's a big difference in that. So I don't know if that's something that can be done, but or if that's the language that's going to be used moving forward as far as the visioning process. Like, we're going to build all of these units. You know, what does that really mean? Does that mean tiny little units for families to have to squeeze into, or does that mean adequate housing? Does that mean affordable housing? You know, just curious.
Thank you, Danette. Very important points. Drew, go right ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm from the Illyrian Swansea Neighborhood Association. The Swansea neighborhood is directly to the west of the golf course. And regarding the need for affordable housing, and really all of the needs that we're trying to address in this committee, grocery stores, many of the other needs besides open space, my question is a question for the city, and specifically community planning and development. How much have you planners studied the land uses to the west and around the area? Because the Swansea neighborhood has a lot of sort of industrial areas, and there's of course the 40th and Colorado A train there, which offers a possibility for density there. But there are many land uses that probably could provide many of the things that we're talking about here, maybe without developing open green space. So how much has the City of Denver and Community and Planning and Development studied land uses and the possibility and potential for affordable housing in Swansea and any of these other areas before we just go tear up green space?
Yeah, you know, we'll have to talk to our colleagues at Host with the, you know, with Host to understand, you know, what areas have been looked at in terms of future affordable housing. You know, are we talking, you know, city-owned property and city-owned? Yep. Oh, Drew?
Well, I'm not talking about Host and housing stability. They have a mission, but I'm talking about what I'm an architect and planner, and it seems like what ought to be done, this is a challenge for planning. How much planning have you done, and how much have you looked at the potential to address some of these needs for affordable housing and stores and all that in let's just say East Swansea, west of the golf course? It seems like there's a lot of potential. That's what you all planners ought to be studying.
David, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I just want to jump in, Drew. I think it's a really, really good point. And, you know, we have done a neighborhood plan for Elyria Swansea in the last, 5 to 6 years. I can't remember quite when it was adopted. That actually looks very closely. Yeah, 2014, so about 7 years now. That looks closely at the 40th and Colorado station. And there is, Blueprint Denver adopted more recently, about a year and a half ago, that carried forth a lot of those future land use, or what we call future place recommendations, to have greater densities around that station in your neighborhood. So, and we should look at that holistically as we look at Park Hill and the golf course site, and thinking about what could actually be happening at the 40th and Colorado station and the adjacent properties. So.
David, thank you. I agree. You want to look at this holistically, but it doesn't seem we are. We're looking only at the area of the golf course to meet these needs. I don't think this steering committee takes a holistic approach. I think we just are looking really rather myopically at a piece of land that somehow somebody bought cheap and wants to develop, and also happens to be a friend of the mayor. Anyway.
In the visioning process that we're in right now, we have not gotten into any of those details, Drew. And I think if we would advance through this process, and we want to dive into those details about actually, site planning for an area that's beyond the golf course, as Courtney has alluded to, all things are on the table, but we're not anywhere near that at this point in the process. But I think it's a really good point that we should look at it holistically.
I think you should be doing that now. Anyway, I'll defer.
Thanks, Drew. I appreciate it. Evelyn, I see your hand. Go right ahead.
This is more of a comment and an observation, and I respectfully say the following statement somewhat reluctantly, and that is, I would love for the steering committee to refrain from the politicization associated with this process. And I say that because it will prevent us from making logical decisions that is going to impact Northeast Park Hill particularly and most directly, and the surrounding areas indirectly. And if we get sidetracked with getting pulled into the politicization of it, it's going to prevent us from thinking critically, innovatively, and creative about some of the potential strategic solutions that we could have. So, it bothers me deeply. Emotion, this is not a place for emotion. This is a place for deep critical thinking. And I'm not saying that at some points, all of us are going to be touched by certain information that comes, forward. At the same time, we are all here for a purpose, and that's to serve our communities. I'm not stating, Drew, because I see you queued up to respond to me. I'm not saying that the points that you're making are not valid. I'm just saying that all of our energy and efforts should not be pointed in that direction to prevent us from the task at hand. And so I just would have been remiss for not saying that.
Thank you, Evelyn. I appreciate it. Drew?
Could I just respond? I'm sorry if anybody thought that I was politicizing something. I'm talking about planning, which is a rather technical process that's a civic process, and I think we've kind of failed here. If I made remarks about a developer or the mayor or something, that I take that back, I'm sorry. But I'm talking about technical planning issues to improve our city. Okay, that's all I'm trying to address, Evelyn, and everybody. I don't mean to politicize anyone or anything. Sorry about that if that was misunderstood.
Thank you, Drew. And thank you, Evelyn. Lamont, I see your hand. Go right ahead, and then we'll go to Imam Ali.
So this is only the second meeting, okay?
Lamont, we
I
can
was looking
barely
at
hear.
tonight as the presentation of Northeast Park Hill as it is.
Lamont, we're having
Looking
a hard
to
time
hear,
hearing you. We're having a really hard
looking
time
to
hearing
hear
you.
any politics or any strong opinions against anything. I want to hear the presentation tonight, okay? And then in the future, perhaps we can take a deeper dive into Heat Island, into the food, you know, and designate time in the future for that. But right now, we got a presentation waiting for James Roy, and it's what, 6:40. So let's move on.
Okay, Lamont, we didn't hear a lot of what you said. I heard a little bit. It was very hard to hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. My speaker wasn't plugged in.
Okay.
This is only the second meeting. Okay. And tonight I wanted to hear more about the data presentations. I'm really not interested in hearing about anyone's politics. I'm really not interested in hearing people try and subvert the process. We are deserving of this process in Northeast Park Hill because we have been divested and ignored for 40 years. So I want to hear from James Roy in his presentation, and then later on down the road, perhaps we can do a deeper dive on these different issues with the easement, with the heat island, with the food desert, and designate more time later. But right now, it's what, 6:41? I want to hear from Mr. Roy.
You got it. Well, he's up next. Thank you, Lamont. We appreciate it. Imam Ali, you go right ahead.
No, I'll defer to Mr. James Roy.
Okay. All right. Thank you. It doesn't look like we have any other questions or comments right now. Thank you so much for all of your comments and questions on the first presentation. So James Roy II, you are up and you have our undivided attention. I know that you're going to do a little bit of the history of the Park Hill area. So take it away.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, how's it going today? I'm gonna share my screen, share a presentation real quick.
Thank you.
I've put together. Let's see if I can figure it out. There we go. Here we go. Everyone sees what I see, right?
We see it.
Presentation going, cool. So yeah, this is what I see as a chance to be able to share some and shed some light on the history of this community, specifically Northeast Park Hill and some of the things around the golf course. This isn't to get into any of the pieces that are debatable. This is actually just to talk about the very factual pieces of this history and how it might contribute to the steering committee and some of the things that we'll also be bringing in the future through our community navigators process. The three takeaways from this presentation that you'll kind of notice the theme of is that Northeast Park Hill has been victim to racist, systemically oppressive practices. It has also faced the loss of generational economic wealth due to those practices and unsuccessful public processes, as Lamont was just referring to, have contributed to distrust in the neighborhood. A little bit about me, just to go real fast on this. Right now, I'm the executive director of Denver Metro Community Impact. The focus on equity. It's a nonprofit. I gave a spiel about that last time, I believe. I also am an urban planning consultant. I am a grad student at University of Colorado, Denver, finishing a master's degree in urban planning that I've been done with the coursework for a long time, been slowly trudging through my thesis, which has been the research actually that I am presenting tonight and have been working on really hard in the Northeast Park Hill neighborhood as one of my main case studies. I'm informed by lived experience I've, I lived in Park Hill for 10 out of my 35 years of life. I went to Smiley Middle School. My grandmother my grandparents bought a house in North Park Hill in 1965 for $16,000 and owned it all the way till the year 2000. Both my grandparents came here as janitors without jobs, or came here without jobs, worked as janitors, and then both became educators. My grandmother was eventually the assistant principal of Smiley Middle School. My grandfather was the president of the NAACP Colorado and Wyoming for a long time, and was also a teacher, a school teacher. My dad and uncles also grew up here. So there's a lot of lived experience, obviously. The research, what else I'm informed by is research, the data, books, articles that I've read for the thesis. I'm also informed by my conversations with elders. I meant to put that on there. I talk with a lot of folks in the community, and I've learned a lot of really great things over the years that I've been around here. Now, really what I want to get into is, like I said, I'm an urban planner. I take responsibility for is what this industry has meant to a community like Park Hill. And it has contributed to long-term systemic damage and oppression that has been intentional. And that's from the combination of the urban planning industry, the real estate industry, and the banking industry, combining for some very insidious practices that have affected the long-term success of this neighborhood, or the Northeast Park Hill neighborhood. These practices that you've probably heard the terms of: redlining, block busting, zoning has some stems in that as well too. And white flight was a part of this dynamic, not a practice. So I shouldn't name that as a practice there. One of the things about the history of planning, there's this guy named Frederick Law Olmsted. He's a celebrated planner, someone that even in schools across the country is still studied. He's done a lot of work across the country, and was one of the premier urban planners in the early 1900s. He was the president of the American City Planning Institute, which was one of the premier national organizations. And with that, he was also a segregationist. One of the most celebrated planners in American history was a segregationist, and he formed segregation committees around the country in the early 1900s. And even said at that time that good zoning policy should contain racial divisions and prevent the mingling of people who are not ready to mingle and don't want to mingle. That's just a little bit of context that I believe is important to what we're talking about when we talk about a neighborhood like Northeast Park Hill and where things go from here. Now, I talked about in this last slide here, you may have noticed segregation, right? There's two types of segregation that we can note here. One, de jure segregation. That is the one that is where the law and public policy allowed segregation to be constitutional. It was declared unconstitutional in 1917, to where the de facto segregation really started. And that's segregation from practices that are not governed or not created from law or government policy, the nuanced and concealed things that happen. They're the ones that private businesses step into. They're also the fears that are drummed up that create the movement of people. And we'll get into that, of course, as well too. Now, redlining, I think a lot of people are hearing this term a lot more lately. But I want to give a little bit of context to what redlining is for those that haven't. Redlining was a measurement of real estate value. These were maps that were created by the urban planning industry, the banking industry, and the real estate industry, like I talked about before, that really told people what the value of an area was. And one of those scales that indicated that value was the lack of a single foreigner or Negro involved in that area. And so when you see we talked about redlining in the last meeting a little bit, but that's one of the things that contributed to a lot of the division, and eventually some of the dynamic that we'll get into that Northeast Park Hill was. Now, a tool to really, you know, when redlining became harder to contain and Black residents started to move into other areas and exercise their rights to be able to buy property in other areas, there were these other, like I said, the de facto segregation that came forth to really continue to keep those lines of segregation thick. And so block busting was one of those tools, which was a practice that real estate agents used to persuade white owners, white property owners, to quickly sell their property as soon as Black people were arriving into the neighborhood. And essentially it was a tool for real estate agents to make a windfall of money. So they would scare everybody out of a block and say, hey, Black people are coming, please, you know, sell your property as quick as possible. It's gonna be ruined. And so you would see that windfall of sales start to happen. And one of the things that, you know, some of the tools that real estate agents used in this were flyers like the one that you see here, and I'll read that in a second. They also even went as far as hiring Black people to walk around the neighborhood, or to even drive down the street playing loud music, to be noticed. That there was all types of different ways that this was you know, created to make sure that people understood that Black people were coming to the neighborhood. This flyer right here, I want to read the last two paragraphs of it. It's the first paragraph is really inviting people to a meeting. It says, matters of vital importance will be discussed relative to fire prevention, lighting, and invasion of Negroes. Did you know that there are Negroes living on Glencoe, Ivanhoe, Jasmine, Kearney, 17th Avenue Parkway, and on Park Hill? Let us get together and protect ourselves. This was a tool that was used to be able to create what was called white flight. The white flight is the phenomena of white people moving out of those areas because of the arrival of Negroes to protect their property value at that time. So, you know, one of the ways that this showed up in Park Hill, specifically Northeast Park Hill, in 1950, when the neighborhood first started being built, it was a white neighborhood. 1960, it was still white. There was a little over 9,000 residents. It was a 91% white neighborhood. Now that flyer and flyers like it and those block busting practices that I talked about were going on very rapidly in you know, in the 1960s. And you can see by 1970, the demographic had completely flipped. You can see on the graph on the right and in the data on the left that in 1970, the neighborhood became 88% Black and stayed that way until you can see the graph, of course, on the right side of it, really tell the story of the displacement that's going on, which is a story for another time. What that looks like, and you know, this is what I call a dot density map, not what I call a dot density map, what is called a dot density map, that shows the racial breakdown of a neighborhood by dots. So one dot equals one person. And you can see the blue dots on this represent Black population. The purple dots on here represent the Latinx population. The green dots represent the white population in the neighborhood. You know, from the systemic nature of that block busting and that real estate flip created was one of the things that actually robbed a lot of people of their generational wealth through real estate, which has been the #1 way to build wealth in this country since the beginning of this country. When people were quick selling their homes, real estate professionals were making, like I said, a lot of money off of the sale of those homes, but then they were also flipping them. We can talk about flipping even today, right now, right? But flipping them to Black home buyers for prices that didn't make sense, prices that were exorbitantly more expensive than what they bought them for, and only because they had the ability to, because the demand on the property and the supply that was available to Black home buyers or potential home buyers was really low. And so these were some of the only areas that they could buy, and they were getting ripped off. And so that contributes to that loss of generational wealth right there. In this map, you can see that, as far as this, on the other side here, on the right side, you see the percentage of low to moderate income residents in the neighborhood. And in Northeast Park Hill and North Park Hill, you can see that it reflects pretty closely to the race and ethnic makeup of those block groups that are in this neighborhood. I just think that's a really telling map right there, and I just wanted to be able to show that. But oops, my video didn't show up. Oh, there it is. Cool. But yeah, this is one of those things that really kind of, starts to define some of that history, some of what people see, the generational change, some of that loss that has been felt in this community. This next part I really wanted to talk about, that we're diving into here, is the structure of Park Hill. I think a lot of us know that we've got these really great small business centers around the greater Park Hill area. And I'm going to play this little video. It's going to show us all of them real quick. Obviously, we've got the Oneida district over here. It's the Oneida Park Business District. There's also the Kearney district. That it's all the yellow blocks or yellow squares that you see on this are those properties. Here's the 23rd and Dexter Business District. We've got Fairfax. And then historically, we've had the Dahlia Shopping Center. And last but not least, we have the Park Hill Shopping Center, also known as the Holly. Of those 6 centers, these have been places where small businesses thrived. We've had restaurant, lounges, markets, barbershops, and salons, laundry, coffee shops. You guys know where they're at. They feel good to be at. They contributed to the economic trajectory of a lot of families in this neighborhood, positive economic trajectory. And the things that continue to contribute in that way. However, I wanted to talk about, some of why, and the reason why I bring this up is how these next 3 pieces of the history in Park Hill really, contribute to maybe some of the thinking that goes into what we need in the future, and not necessarily saying at all that it happens on a golf course, or the former golf course, but to contribute to what it is that, as from an equity standpoint, that we might have lost, and that we might have that we need to think about, regardless of where it would be. Oops. Next slide. I don't know why it's not working. Sorry, guys. There we go. There we go. Okay. All right. First one I'm going to talk about is Dahlia Square. So right now, everyone is aware that we have the Mental Health Center of Denver's Dahlia Campus for Health and Well-Being. At the site, we also have the Park Hill Health Center by Denver Health, and the Dahlia Senior Apartments that are at the former Dahlia Shopping Center. To give a little bit of history of what Dahlia Square was, it was originally a brick manufacturing yard for a while. It produced 24 million bricks that are laid throughout Park Hill. So it's likely if you have a house that was built in that time, that the bricks came from Dahlia, actually. In 1958, the largest supermarket in Colorado existed at Dahlia. That was King Soopers. It was King Soopers site, and there was a laundromat and a dry cleaner, a cobbler shop, 2 gas stations, a dress shop, a donut store, a beauty salon, and even a McDonald's right there on 35th and Eudora. That McDonald's later became a Tasty Freeze, which I don't know what that is, but maybe somebody on this call does. I've never heard of a Tasty Freeze. There was also the Dahlia bowling lanes, 24 lanes there, where there was a lot of community that happened. A lot of, there were leagues for youth and adults, and that was something that brought a lot of pride to the community. Now, of course, like I said, showed you earlier in this presentation, when the King Soopers arrived to the neighborhood, it was still a predominantly white neighborhood. I think that's an important piece to understand here, especially given what the trajectory of the shopping center later became. In 1969, a group of African Americans wanted to buy the property. They had some trouble financing the deal, but were eventually backed by the Presbyterian Economic Development Corporation and were lent $500,000 to be able to buy that property. And it became what they claimed the largest Black-owned shopping center in the country. At that time, King Soopers, right after that, closed pretty much within 2 years, and really started to contribute to some of the decline of the shopping center, to where it actually never recovered. There was a lot of struggles after that, after the King Soopers left the area and was a vacant building for a while. There was, whenever in the urban planning world, when you see vacant buildings or buildings that don't have eyes on the street, that sometimes lends itself to the loitering of youth, and which can contribute to crime and vandalism. And so you saw a lot of crime and vandalism happening at the property, and it started to deteriorate in a lot of ways. After years, there were different fits and starts of trying to revive the shopping center, different planning processes that came to the area, and to contribute to that distrust that I was talking about. And there were environmental issues that also caused the property to be to get caught up in being stale for as long as it was. Like I said, now it's a very different property, and you see all of these wonderful services that have arrived. But one thing I want to note, though, is that this small business center has really been eliminated in some ways. Great services that have arrived to the community, great housing that's arrived to the community, but not the replacement of small business there, just to be aware. I wanted to do a little bit of interactive stuff here because I've got 2 other slides that I'm going to show, but I wanted to open it up and see if anyone wanted to share about their own experiences, or if they had any experiences with Dahlia Square back when it was different, and or what the feeling was around it. If anyone on the steering committee has anything to share about it, and if not, I'll continue.
I think that I'm glad you brought up the small business aspect. Moving forward, I would hope that if it does get developed, that the businesses won't be another Starbucks, another Target. I would hope that small businesses would take the forefront of priority, would be prioritized. Small businesses were definitely the heart of Park Hill when I was younger. So I'd like to see more of that.
Anyone else want to say anything about Dahlia?
James, Andrea wants to know where the roller rink was.
The roller rink. I have an aerial that I put on it, but it's right across the parking lot from the King Soopers. So right in this middle picture right here, you see the abandoned King Soopers. it was basically right across the parking lot near the, I believe, where the Dahlia senior housing is located.
Somebody needs to tell you what Tasty Freeze is too, but that's another meeting.
Imam Ali, you have your hand up, I saw. Did you want to say something? You're on mute, by the way.
Tasty Freeze is ice cream.
Nice. Thanks for letting me know. I could have just Googled it, I guess, but I'm glad. Thanks for letting me know.
But coming from Chicago, I've been here now for 31 years, and I heard from others that have been here much longer than me about the, and I saw some of it actually as the Dahlia Square in Hollywood was going downward. But before that, I heard about the thriving businesses that was in that area, and that's something that'll always stick with me. And I think we need to redevelop what we had in that area.
Yeah, you know, I think with the just you know, one of the things of it being a you know, a celebrated Black small business center for a while, that's something that that stands out in my mind right there.
James, Jerry Grimes has her hand raised.
Being a child of the 50s and raised here, I remember it all. I think he did a great interview. Remember when my parents purchased their first house in East Denver in the White Flight, and the utilization of a lot of the businesses in Dahlia Square as well as Holly. So that, you know, I remember the thriving neighborhoods, the sense of community, because I lived that experience. I am a Denverite as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Grimes. And actually was going on to the Holly next, and I was going to be able to, of course, shout out your name for all the work that you've done over there. If anyone doesn't have anything else to say about Dahlia, I'm going to move on to Holly, if that's cool. All right. So the Park Hill Shopping Center, affectionately known as the Holly, been through a lot as well too. Now remember, like I said, we've got these different shopping centers throughout Greater Park Hill, and none of the Northeast Park Hill ones exist in the way that they did. I think that's something important to really think about here. So we at one point, the Park Hill Shopping Center was actually the junk pile of for Clayton Holdings for a very long time. In 1953, the center really started to be developed. There were 20 stores that opened up at the site. There was a Safeway there that closed in the late 60s. It's now the Hope Center. And Mrs. Grimes, who just spoke there, is the executive director of the Hope Center for Children and the Center for Developmentally Disabled Adults. I hope I said the name right, Ms. Grimes. I'm really sorry if I didn't. And then, yeah, so the Safeway store closed in the 60s. So like I said, we've got a King Soopers that left the neighborhood and a Safeway that left the neighborhood in a very similar time. This became a hangout spot for Black youth in the neighborhood. Actually, my dad, growing up in the community, remembers hanging out at the Holly a lot in the 60s. There in 1967 and 68, there was a lot of racial tensions that were going on. 67, actually, there was a police incident where a youth had been beaten near the site, and there were some riots that sparked off. Tensions between the police and Black youth continued. Dr. Martin Luther King was murdered, of course, the next year, and there was a very tense environment there for a little while. There was in that time as well, through those riots, through some of that tension, A hardware store was burned down with some Molotov cocktails, 1967. Throughout, the trajectory of the neighborhood and the change of the economics and the systemic things that we've talked about, the rise of gang violence and along with the drug issues that come with gang violence, increased through the 90s. In 2008, the property was burned down. You see in the middle picture right there. This was a gang tension, situation that where the property was eventually, vandalized, burned down. That property sat there for longer than it would in other neighborhoods. We'll just say that. You see that in this last picture here, where there are people standing in front of that property, mourning the loss of it. And the reminder driving by it for months that was something that, they had no idea when it was going to change. Due to some of the strong community activists in this neighborhood, which has a strong legacy of, people came together to say that was not going to work for us anymore, and got together with so Mrs. Grimes being one of those people, got together with the city, who brought in the Urban Land Conservancy and the Denver Foundation to form a group called the Holly Area Redevelopment Project, which started in 2010, 9 or 10, and eventually led to the development of the Boys and Girls Club that is over there, as well as it was first the Roots Elementary School that is now occupied by the Center for African American Health. The goal was to create a campus for children, and that was accomplished in a lot of ways, and it's still being explored by the HARP committee right now and continuously into the future. On the other side of that stuff, we have a property owned by Miss Dolores Wilson. She's been a long-time entrepreneur and someone that is deeply respected in the community, that has been a business. She used to actually own businesses at the Dahlia. She now owns businesses at Holly, and she is the last holder of that commercial small business property in the neighborhood, and someone that I believe should be celebrated for providing affordable retail spaces for people. So yeah, that's Holly. That's one. This is a hot one. Sometimes there's a lot of history here, a lot of things to talk about. But I wanted to open up the floor again for comments on the Holly from an experience standpoint, not from what you heard or what you didn't, you haven't been a part of, but what have you experienced? What are your feelings on Holly, personal feelings? And want to open the floor for that, just like we did for Dahlia. No comments?
You're doing great, James. This is so important. I see Reverend Downing's hand raised. Go right ahead, Reverend Downing.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so about the fire, so is it thought that was racially motivated, or is that unclear?
That was actually the Crips of Denver burning down the hangout spot of the Bloods.
Unfortunate. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lamont, go right ahead.
So I think with both the Dahlia and the Holly, prior to the 70s, were good examples of Black economics in the positive sense. After the white flight, those two areas continued to thrive. Black businesses moved in. And then not to mention the corporate businesses that supported the Stapleton Airport. In other words, economically, Northeast Park Hill was very self-contained. We had the small businesses, we had the retail shopping, we had the multifamily housing in Northeast Park Hill. Then you also had the corporate businesses that supported United Airlines, Frontier, Continental. They had reservation centers. Then you had the car rental agencies, the hotels, the motels. Northeast Park Hill was very unique from that standpoint, even though the population demographics had converted to mostly Black folks. Those businesses and those corporations were there for a long time. So what really upset the whole ecosystem was when Stapleton Airport was shut down and those corporate businesses followed the airport.
Thank you so much for that context.
We really haven't rebounded since then, but I believe that we should because we've got the people who want it to happen. So growing up, that's where we spent all of our time and our money was in Northeast Park Hill. We didn't have to go outside the community for groceries or anything else. Now we do.
Thank you, Lamont.
Yeah, thank you so much for that context. If there's no more on the Holly, I'm going to move on to our next one. Everyone good? Cool. We'll talk about the golf club, Park Hill Golf Club. Obviously, one of the main things that we're talking about here. And I think a lot of people already kind of know the history, but I want to kind of get through some of the some of that really early side of things. It was owned by the Clayton College for Boys, which officially began admitting white male orphans in 1911. It was white male orphans all the way until 1969 when the Colorado Supreme Court found that it was illegal for them to restrict their services to white children. And that was when it finally actually opened up to other, where they had to open up to other people. It didn't mean it became welcoming yet, but it had to open up at that time. It was before it was golf course, it was a dairy farm that had educated the orphans and provided obviously dairy and also crops and chickens and all kinds of things that were on the property. It became a golf club in 1932. So it's from 1932 to 1969. I think it's pretty easy to predict that was not a welcoming place for African Americans of the community, especially since 1969 is when the white flight was occurring. The golf course was, I think something that probably started to open up to the community a little bit later in time there, probably, in the 70s and 80s. But in the recent history, there's a lot of different feelings around it. The golf course has produced some fond memories for a lot of people that might even be on this call. One of the great things also about it is that even if you're not a golfer, the golf course created a lot of memories through the clubhouse. I talked to a lot of people throughout Northeast Park Hill, and they have a lot of fond memories about events and gatherings and being able to be social. And I know we all miss that right now with this pandemic. But I remember my mom had her 40th birthday at the Park Hill Golf Club. It was Matrix themed. And so she was dressed in all black with two of her friends. And they were, and it was a really fun time. I remember, can't remember what age I was, but it was something that I definitely remember, and remember a lot of other events there too. So not only was the golf course a place to recreate and a place for people to be able to enjoy that. I even recently heard a story from one of our meetings from a guy in his 20s that was saying that you know, he's a young Black male that said that was where he learned to play golf and wouldn't have had the opportunity anywhere else. He actually was a part of a program where he was even able to build his own golf club and use it on the course, which sounded awesome to me. Thought that was a really great opportunity for him. But I also, you know, like I said, around the clubhouse itself, I think what people remember about it in recent history is something that can be taken into context. What the gathering meant, what what golf produces. I don't play golf myself, never have, but I'm gonna try someday. But would love to, you know, once again open up the floor to what people have felt and experienced about the golf course, and what you know. Obviously, there's some deep racist roots to it, but you know, some different modern experiences with it, and would love to open that up once again.
I see Sandria, you have your hands raised, and James, I just want to let you know we're down to our last 10 minutes of the meeting, but we do have at least one hand raised here.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So, you know, I just wanted to say that my grandmother actually used to work at Clayton. She worked at Clayton, you know, back in the 50s as like a, you know, totally inappropriate word at this time, but she would have been called a maid at that time. But also, you know, with respect to the Park Hill Golf Course, oh man, I remember just within the past 2-3 years being able to go over there and have lunch and having fantastic drinks. And I used to go over there to the Argonauts used to have like a monthly wine tasting, and I would go there for that. And just all kinds of fun events. But I must say I miss the kitchen being open and being able to go over there for lunch. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
There are some comments in the chat room, James, if you get a chance to just.
Yeah, I'll exit out. I can't see them because I'm in the presentation, so I'll exit out. And
Yeah, there's some people that are just weighing in on some of their memories of it. So I just wanted you to know that that's a place for you to look to. Oh, I see Shandi's hand. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I grew up in Park Hill, and as a high schooler decided to learn golf and be on the team. And Park Hill Golf Course was one of the two that we would practice at. So Park Hill and City Park Golf Course. So I have some personal memories of learning to play golf there as well, and enjoying the outdoor space that was right in my neighborhood. So being able to just go on over after school, and you know, as a young adult, being able to go back over and use the driving range. So I have a lot of personal positive memories connected to that place as well.
Thank you. Hattie, did I see your hand? Did I miss you?
Yeah, sorry. Back to Lamont, she made a good point about the Holly area. And as we talk about what kind of development happens or whatever we do with the golf course, I think it's important to know that we shouldn't take away from those businesses, because we want to bring something to the community. And I feel like those businesses there, maybe we can develop more and be more. I mean, I walked to the park there and we play racquetball in the recreational area with my daughter. And it's nice to have, like, there's a fried chicken place there and it's delicious. And I just don't want to take away from those small businesses for whatever happens. I thought it was a good point that she brought out, that, we should bring something good instead of taking away from them.
Thank you. James, any final thoughts from you? This was
no, I think, yeah, I was reading through the comments, and a lot of really great things written here. I don't know if I missed anything, but I thank you for your time, and really, appreciate it. And hopefully this was helpful to being, informative to what, the choices you have to make later on down the line. Of course, it's going to be a pretty long process here, but I want to be able to be supportive and providing information.
Thank you, James. James, we thank you for sort of closing our meeting with For some people, it's a trip maybe down memory lane, but for some people, it's some new information and some history that maybe we didn't know. I think that's always really important to provide as foundation to a group that has to make some pretty big recommendations. So I really am very thankful for the time that you spent with us and the time that you took to put that together. Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I just want to thank each of you for staying just really engaged and connected tonight. It was a lot of information, a lot of foundational things to think about, to spark conversation, to raise our differences. All of it is the catalyst for that. I am so thankful to each of you for your ability to do that. There are some very rich comments that are always in the chat room. I do want you to make sure that throughout our meetings, our steering committee meetings, that you don't miss the things that are happening in chat. I know that a virtual environment is hard to concentrate sometimes, but there are things being said verbally, but there are also things being said in chat that are really rich comments and reflections. So make sure you're taking a look at all of those. Our next meeting is April 13th at 5:30. It will be a full agenda, but I want to tell you that it is a more action-oriented agenda. It is the meeting, or third meeting, where we begin to move into doing some things. You've been doing a lot of listening and weighing in, but now it's time for us to do some things. And one of the things that we have to accomplish that I think is a really important thing is to create our steering committee charter. Just for the public that's watching, we got I call it a teeing off sort of document to start our thinking about a charter. And then it will be up to this group to make sure that the language in the charter really is reflective of what's accurate and what's reasonable for this group to work together. So next meeting will be a lot of us, I think for the very first time, needing to work together to come up with something that from an equity lens works for all of us. So it'll be a lot of hands-on work and your best thinking to have that happen. So if you haven't had a chance to even share some of your initial thoughts about the charter that you received, you've got a little bit more time. You've got until the April 13th meeting to be able to share some of those. I'd like to try to pull together some of your initial thinking about the existing charter so that we don't start from scratch when we get together. I want to be able to share the things that you've weighed in on already. So I wanted to let you know that. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, opinions, things that you need to weigh in on about anything from this meeting or the process, please don't hesitate to email me and Courtney, and we'll be happy to get back with you. Courtney and David tonight captured many of your thoughts and comments. Those are the things we want to keep up with. I also want to thank each of you before we go, those of you that weighed in a very important way about what it's going to take for us to get this work done together. It's going to take an interesting level of leadership. We all have opinions and investments in how this all turns out. I'm the neutral party because you have to make the recommendations, not me. My job really is to help you to move through this process in a way that doesn't actually cause harm to you in the process. And that when you finish this process together, you can say, job well done. That's my job. Your job is to think about ways that we can work together from a leadership standpoint to get this work done, not squashing your voice in the process. Everybody belongs here. Everybody's voice belongs here. So I want to thank you for that. So on that note, with 2 minutes to spare, unless you have questions, thoughts, or comments, I'd like to wish you a good night, but let me just leave a space. It's 7:29. I want to respect your time. We have a minute if you do have any questions, comments, or thoughts before we go. Thank you for your comments in chat as well. Okay, well, let me release you back to your lives. Thank you so much for your time tonight. We appreciate you. Thanks to the steering committee. Thanks to the city team. Thanks to the community watching. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.